Welcome to another deep dive on Control-Alt Society. I'm your host, and today we are doing a complete system reset on how you think about privilege.
And I'm your expert guide. And yeah, system reset is definitely the right phrase for what we're looking at today.
Right, because usually when you want to measure someone's privilege, you look at things you can, easily slap onto a spreadsheet.
No, for sure. Like their bank account balance or their zip code.
Exactly, or like generational wealth, legacy admissions. We treat privilege as this highly visible, deeply structural, entirely material thing. You picture this sprawling country club, you point at it and you say, there it is, that's privilege.
Yeah, it's treated as an external asset, like something you possess rather than something you just, fundamentally are.
Right. But okay, let's unpack this, because today we're pulling apart this short but incredibly provocative video essay, and it completely demands that we change how we discuss privilege.
It really does. It moves the concept entirely out of the material world and right into the psychological one.
Yeah. We're investigating a concept the source calls African privilege. And they define it very specifically. They say it's this profound, exportable confidence that comes from having your formative years simply not defined by your race.
What's fascinating here is how they don't treat this as some vague, abstract sociological theory,
No, not at all.
The essayist presents African privilege as a highly measurable, tangible psychological advantage. It's a baseline of mental freedom that fundamentally alters human development.
Which is just wild to think about. So our mission today for this deep dive is to break down the mechanics of this argument. We need to investigate how this specific mindset is forged, how it alters professional trajectories, and critically, what happens when this mindset crosses borders.
Right, when it enters a totally different societal structure in the West.
Exactly. But to really grasp the impact of this, we got to start with the mechanics. Like, how does the source actually calculate who has this privilege?
Because they literally lay it out as a mathematics of identity.
Yeah, it's a precise formula driven by two really specific variables, geography and time.
It reads like an equation for psychological development, honestly. The entire premise rests on the amount of formative childhood years a person spends living in an African Black majority country before ever moving to the West.
And the video establishes these absolute, totally unforgiving ends to this spectrum. Like, if you were born and raised in the West, the essayist argues your African privilege is zero.
Just a flat zero.
Not a little bit, a permanent zero. But if you were born in Africa and spent those crucial formative childhood years living there, you possess what they call maximum African privilege. It's like a completely binary starting point.
Yeah, which is a really bold claim to make.
Well, wait, hold on. Why is this entirely locked to childhood? I mean, this feels like a massive assumption by the source.
How do you mean?
Well, if an adult moves to Lagos or Nairobi at, say, age 22, lives there for 2 decades, builds a whole business, starts a family, are you telling me their brain is fundamentally incapable of absorbing this privilege?
Yeah. This raises an important question, but it actually comes down to a biological and sociological constraint that the source highlights.
Okay, lay it on me.
So they focus heavily on the period when the brain is actively developing its core worldview. Think of childhood as the period where your brain's operating system is compiled from scratch.
Like writing the foundational code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everything after that is just installing new software or, running updates. You can change your habits in adulthood, adapt to a new culture, sure, but you are always filtering that new reality through the fundamental operating system you built when you were 7, 8, or 10 years old.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of like learning a language. Like if you learn a language at age 4, you don't have an accent. The grammar and the syntax are just native to your brain.
Yes. Perfect analogy.
But if you learn it at 22, no matter how soon you become, you were always consciously translating it from your mother tongue.
That is exactly it. If your fundamental sense of self is built in an environment where you are the absolute majority, that psychological foundation sets before you ever encounter Western societal structures.
Structures that might try to, categorize or marginalize you.
Right. The essayist is arguing that an adult moving to a Black majority country later in life is already carrying the psychological baggage, the accent, using your metaphor of their formative years. They just can't unwrite their original operating system.
This actually completely reframes a massive cultural narrative for us.
Oh, completely.
We have this pervasive myth in the West about immigrant success. Like whenever we see a highly successful immigrant demographic, we automatically chalk it up to pure grit. We say, oh, they just work harder, they have the hustle, they suffered so much to get here.
But the essayist is quietly debunking that, or at least adding a really massive caveat to it.
By suggesting that their success might not originate from the struggle of migrating, but actually from the absolute lack of struggle regarding their identity before they migrated.
Yes. They aren't succeeding in the West despite where they came from. They are succeeding because of the psychological baseline that their early environment provided.
They arrive with a fully funded psychological bank account,
That's a great way to put it.
which means we really need to look at what is actually happening in that childhood environment to fund that account, right? What does this normalcy actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, the source points directly to the power of total societal homogeneity. It's the everyday reality of your environment. If you are growing up in this setting, your school friends look like you.
Your teacher looks like you.
Right. And the essayist uses these incredibly striking, contrasting examples to show how deep this goes. You watch the evening news, and sure, the criminal being arrested is black, but so is the police officer arresting them.
And so is the judge handing down the sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The person sweeping the streets outside your house is black, but so is the millionaire driving the luxury car right past them.
Wait, but is it just normalcy, though? I'd argue it's an active insulation. Because in the West, race, class, and morality are historically so entangled. What this environment does is completely detach race from societal roles.
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction.
It isn't just that these kids don't see race, it's that society isn't actively weaponizing it against them. It makes race a complete non-variable.
If we look at this through, say, an economist lens, what the essayist is really describing is the absence of a cognitive tax.
Ooh, cognitive tax. I like that. Explain that.
So in any society, managing how you are perceived, especially if you are in a marginalized group, requires constant background mental computing power.
Like having mental RAM constantly running in the background, just draining your battery.
Precisely. You are spending cognitive resources just to prove you belong in a room. You burn energy decoding whether a piece of critical feedback was based on the quality of your work or based on your background.
You have to navigate microaggressions all day.
Right. All of that is a tax on your computing power. But when your identity is the system default, you don't pay that tax. You keep all that energy.
And you spend it on growth.
Yeah.
Man, that totally shifts how we view early educational benefits. It's not that the schools in this homogeneous environment are magically injecting better information into these kids.
Oh, not at all.
It's that the student isn't burning 20% of their daily energy managing their societal existence.
Yeah.
They don't sit in a classroom wondering if the teacher's critique is racially motivated. They just learn the math. They just play the sport.
It connects perfectly to the essayist's summary of this feeling. They say, being black is just not part of your identity. It's not a personality trait.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, they follow it up with this brilliant line. You might have 99 problems, but race isn't one of them.
It's like gravity. You don't walk around all day thinking about gravity because it applies to everyone equally. It's just the invisible, neutral background of your life. And because it's invisible, it allows for a completely unhindered development of your personality. You just exist as an individual. You are a student, a friend, an athlete, a nerd.
The privilege is the mental freedom that comes from that total absence of racial friction. When you spend your first 18 years without that friction, your sense of self becomes incredibly dense. It's deeply rooted.
But, the real test of this psychological armor isn't how it functions back home in that homogeneous environment.
No, the real test is what happens the moment it hits customs at JFK or Heathrow.
Exactly. When you take a brain wired to ignore race and drop it into a Western society completely obsessed with it, what breaks first?
This is where the concept moves from just a developmental theory into a highly volatile real-world application. Because when someone takes this maximum African privilege and moves to the West, the environment suddenly shifts, but their operating system does not.
So what does this all mean? Let's look at this like a product manager. You take this untaxed mind, this deeply rooted sense of self, and you export it into a Western corporate boardroom or an elite academic institution.
And the source says this creates immense confidence, this sort of don't you know who I am
Yeah,
attitude.
right. And that unshakable sense of self isn't just a personality quirk. It is a structural moat. It operates as a massive competitive advantage when they migrate.
It absolutely functions as a structural moat. because they are immune to the imposter syndrome that the new society tries to project onto them.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
They arrive in a highly stratified Western society that has deeply ingrained expectations about race, and they simply refuse to participate in those expectations.
He literally didn't learn the rules of Western racial dynamics when their brain was compiling its code, so they don't know how to play by them.
To go back to your language analogy, they are entirely fluent in a completely different social language, and they just refuse to speak the local dialect of racial hierarchy. They carry this bold, inherent expectation of respect, because they were never taught they deserved anything less.
But the essayist is very careful not to paint this as, like, a universal fairy tale, right?
Right.
This exported confidence is explicitly described as a double-edged sword.
It's definitely not universally positive.
Yeah, the video states that this imported confidence can be used as a force of good, but it can just as easily be used to create utter havoc.
It's a superpower, but it's one that creates immense societal friction.
The source even lists specific examples. For the force of good, the speaker points to their childhood friend, Miss Anne Harriman, and to Dr. Scala. But then for the utter havoc side, they point to their own namesake.
Right.
Now, they don't give us the explicit resumes of these people, but they firmly categorize the outcomes into these two extreme buckets, which totally begs the question, if the psychological baseline is exactly the same, why does one person become a pioneering doctor and another become an agent of absolute chaos when they enter Western society?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we really have to play the systemic pragmatist.
Okay, tell me more.
When you enter a system that expects you to pay the cognitive tax and you flat out refuse to pay it, your confidence is often heavily penalized.
Oh, for sure.
Western corporate and social structures often have very subtle, unwritten rules about hierarchy, about deference, and, frankly, knowing your place.
Right. The room expects a certain level of humility, or at least some acknowledgement of the existing power dynamics.
Exactly. So when someone with maximum African privilege walks in, completely indifferent to those unwritten rules, the system pushes back hard. And depending on the individual's character, that clash manifests differently.
How so?
Well, when it's channeled positively, like the Dr. Scala mentioned in the source, that refusal to accept limitations breaks down barriers. They walk into medical fields or elite universities and achieve incredible things because they simply do not entertain the idea that they don't belong there.
They force the system to adapt to their brilliance.
Yes, that is the force for good.
They basically bypass the gatekeepers because they don't even recognize that the gate exists in the first place.
Precisely. But what happens when that exact same "don't you know who I am" attitude is unmoored from empathy or self-awareness or constructive ambition?
Oh boy.
If you refuse to speak the local dialect of social hierarchy, people don't always think you're principled. They often just think you're arrogant.
And that's the havoc.
Yeah.
If you walk into a complex new environment and refuse to acknowledge any of the subtle cultural nuances, because you literally never learned to see them, you are going to steamroll people.
Yeah, you violate cultural norms left and right.
The havoc isn't necessarily malicious then. It can just be the chaos of a bulldozer driving through a china shop, completely unaware that the china is even there.
That's it, exactly. The privilege itself is entirely neutral. It's just raw, untaxed confidence. It is the application of that unshakable confidence in a new, highly reactive environment that determines whether you get the pioneer or the bulldozer.
Man, it is such a brilliant way to examine professional growth and career impacts. It makes you realize that when we evaluate someone's professional trajectory, especially immigrants navigating Western spaces, we aren't just looking at their raw talent or their work ethic.
No, we're watching a collision between a society's expectations and an individual's psychological armor.
And that armor is completely invisible until the exact moment it impacts the new environment. You can't audit it on a spreadsheet, but it dictates every single professional interaction they have.
It really does.
So let's step back and look at the whole mechanism we've uncovered today. We started with a concept that completely redefines privilege, moving it from your bank account to your brain.
Right.
We've explored the formula, how geography and time, specifically those highly neuroplastic childhood years in a Black majority environment, compile an operating system free from racial friction.
And we examine the incredible educational and developmental benefits of that untaxed mind. How societal homogeneity allows a child to spend their cognitive RAM on growth rather than survival.
And finally, we tracked what happens when that untaxed mind is exported to the West. It operates as a massive structural moat, right? A competitive advantage in boardrooms and universities that can shatter glass ceilings. but can just as easily create utter havoc if that untaxed confidence manifests as sheer arrogance.
It really is a system reset on how we understand human potential.
It is.
And, it leaves us with a really profound final thought to consider today, one that stretches far beyond just the specific examples in the video essay.
But that?
If our formative environments literally program our default cognitive load, we have to look at the larger professional landscape and ask a very uncomfortable question. How much of what we consider to be pure merit or raw professional success is actually just the luxury of an untaxed mind?
Oh, wow. Yeah. How much brilliance is currently being lost globally simply because people are forced to burn their mental energy managing how society perceives them.
And conversely, what could humanity achieve if every child grew up truly believing, at a foundational neurological level, that their identity was never a limitation, but just a neutral fact of their existence?
That is an incredible thought experiment. Just imagine the sheer computing power that would be freed up globally.
It's staggering.
It brings us right back to that opening idea. The most powerful privileges on Earth aren't the ones you can lock in a vault. They are the invisible, untaxed ways your brain was allowed to grow when you were a child.
Oh, absolutely.
The video essayist actually ends their piece with a direct question to the audience, and it's the perfect place for us to leave you today. Do you think you have African privilege, and how does it show up for you in your day-to-day life?